Hello folks, MinMaxMunchking back with a video revisiting one of the oldest character builds on this channel, the Divine Shadow Sorcadin. Now most of that character concept and build is still the same, but there are a few key differences. Before I cover those, let me catch you up to speed in case you haven't watched the first video or you're not fully familiar with the concept of a Paladin Sorcerer in the first place. In essence, Sorcadins are pretty simple creatures. They hit things very hard. In order to do that, you need the good old Paladin level 2 feature, the Divine Smite. It provides a spike of radiant damage on a weapon attack hit, provided you spend one of your unused spell slots. The issue with it is that Paladins don't really have a lot of spell slots to begin with. They are charisma based half casters, and it takes a while for them to get to a point where burning a spell slot on a Divine Smite is not a significant resource investment. See, killing an enemy before it kills you is kind of the whole point of combat in the first place. Dealing a lot of damage and doing it fast is what Paladins do very well, but it's also very inefficient in terms of resource management. Q Sorcerers, another charisma-based casters whose full spellcasting progression provides significantly more spell slots for Paladins to use their smites on. With 12 levels in Sorcerer, 6 in Paladin and 2 in Fighter, you are effectively a 15th level multi-class spellcaster, which gives you a lot more spell slots than a single class Paladin can ever dream of. And if you're wondering, but wait, MinMaxMunchking, what's a fighter doing in there? I'd say that's a valid question. I'll talk about it soon, so keep watching and make sure you Divine Smite the hell out of that like button to slay the YouTube algorithm fiend. Also, now that you've already scrolled down below, you might as well spend just 2 more spell slots to subscribe to the channel and bang the notification bell icon. Now, unlike bards, for example, which are also charisma based full casters that can speed up Paladin's spell slot progression, Sorcerer's list of spells has much better lower level spells like Shield, Absorb Elements, Booming Blade, and Shadow Blade. These spells further bolster Paladin's offensive and defensive capabilities. The two so-called Skag cantrips, Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, really make this multi-class combination excel in terms of damage output. With Shadow Blade in hand, Paladin's extra attack allowing you to swing it twice, and a Sorcerer's feature, Quickened Spell Meta Magic, you can effectively attack 3 times on your turn, stacking Divine Smite on top of all of those attacks, provided that they all hit. The end result is an absolute flood of d8s being rolled on the table for a crap ton of Psychic, Radiant and Thunder damage. This can easily result in a 1-turn kill, especially if you manage to land a critical hit, which just might happen due to the advantage provided by the Shadow Blade spell when in dim light or darkness. Speaking of darkness, Shadow Sorcerer, which this particular Sorcadin utilizes, gives you 120 feet of dark vision and an extra darkness spell. Now, concentration prevents you from using darkness and Shadow Blade simultaneously for a permanent advantage, but if you're dealing with a high armor class monster in the middle of the broad daylight, where Shadow Blade's advantage is automatically negated, there is another way to improve your accuracy. Sacred Weapon Channel Divinity that you get as a level 3 Oath of Devotion Paladin makes you a super accurate monster mashing machine. With a minimum of +3 to hit on top of your ordinary attack bonus, you will land 15% more attacks than you would normally do. And if you're thinking, but wait, MinMaxMunchking, Shadow Blade is a bonus action, Sacred Weapon is an action, that means the entire first turn of combat is spent buffing yourself up. How's that any good? You would be right in that assessment, if not for 2 levels of Fighter for that sweet action surge feature. See, activating Sacred Weapon Channel Divinity with your action is not really a problem once you get the option to get an extra action on your turn once per short rest. Seeing how all channel divinities are short rest dependent features themselves, you can basically do this multiple times per day, 1 time per short rest. Now, there is a way to get 1 more attack in a round on top of the 3 attacks that you can do on your turn. Instead of increasing your strength score like I recommended back in 2018, adding in Sentinel Feet into the mix allows you to punish the enemy for attacking your friends or trying to run away from you. The feat synergizes with another feat, Warcaster, which I still absolutely recommend on this character. With those two, you get even more chances to cast Booming Blade on enemies using your reaction. And since we are speaking about the feats, the good old Resilient Constitution at level 1 as a variant human will simultaneously give you more hit points and better odds of succeeding on Constitution saves to maintain concentration on many of your spells, most notably Shadow Blade. The downside of having one more feat treat is that you will only have 2 ability score improvements left to spare for stat bumps. I'd personally still go for maxed out charisma because so many of your features and spells key off of it, but if you prefer just focusing on increasing your accuracy as much as possible, maxing out strength won't be the worst thing you can do either. Now, you're a 6th level paladin and a 12th level sorcerer, so a couple of cantrips, reaction spells, and a magical weapon made out of shadowy thingies are clearly not the only spells you have access to. For ranged situations, I still prefer Chill Touch for necrotic damage and healing prevention. Prestidigitation, Minor Illusion, and Mold Earth or Shape Water give you enough utility cantrip versatility to deal with most situations. For Paladin, I'd go with typical picks like Bless, Wrathful Smite, Command, Cure Wounds. At level 2 you get Aid, which is a rare low level spell that scales very well with higher level slots, and obviously Find Steed, which improves your base mobility. For Sorcerer, Shield and Absorb Elements are still supreme as level 1 choices. Shadow Blade is an obvious choice as it multiplies the damage significantly. Misty Step is a versatile in or out option when dealing with grapples, fleeing enemies, wide bottomless pits, and whatever other situation necessitates a short range teleport. For level 3 spells, I still believe Counterspell is the best overall option, especially paired with subtle spell meta magic. However, instead of haste like I recommended back in 2018, for this character specifically I think Fly is a better choice because it provides a similar movement buff while also enabling you to get into melee with flying enemies, something which almost all melee characters struggle with. I kind of skimmed over level 4 spells in my first video back in 2018, so let me fix that by saying I'd strongly consider Banishment on this character, specifically because it synergizes well with Hound of Ill Omen disadvantage on a saving throw against it. Dimension Door is like Misty Step's big brother, allowing you to bring a barbarian or melee fighter with you. Hold Monster is another spell that synergizes very well with Hound of Ill Omen, making it a potent tool for burning legendary resistances. In most cases you're better off just dumping a bunch of smites, shadow and booming blade damage into the enemy, but sometimes it really pays to have a plan B like this. Synaptic Static is okay for a bigger horde of enemies, particularly for the nasty debuff effect. I'd still recommend the same 2 level 6 spells, Mass Suggestion for immediately removing a bunch of enemy minions from the battlefield, and Disintegrate to get your barbarians and fighters out of spells like Wall of Force or Force Cage. Progression wise, dipping just 1 level into Sorcerer early on provides many benefits and only postpones your extra attack and aura of protection by 1 level. However, you will be able to compensate this downside with 120 feet dark vision, possibility to keep yourself above 0 hit points, Skag Blade cantrips, defensive spells like Shield and Absorb Elements, and an extra caster level for Divine Smites. It takes 12 levels to get all the critical components, but every new level is a meaningful increase in power, and your combat presence will be a force multiplier for your party at any level and at any stage. On the other hand, if you really want to get that Nova Sorcadin feel at lower levels and don't really care that much about mechanics, optimal leveling, or like being the most balanced character offensively and defensively, you can invest into Sorcerer and Fighter sooner, but this approach will postpone your Paladin martial progression and force you to miss out on aura of protection for quite a while. I played a very similar character like this up to level 9 in a Diablo-inspired campaign a few years ago. I was able to dump the most damage in the first round and kill tough demons before they got the chance to really hurt me and the party, but on the other hand I was also a proper glass cannon, so use this kind of character progression at your own risk. With all these changes, let's explore how much melee damage this character can do if you just go all in with it. It's not something I would recommend you do often, or even probably ever, depending on the situation, as resource management is an important part of playing this character, but it's also important to know what you're capable of in a situation that calls for extreme measures. First, I will assume all attack rolls are hits. I'm a firm believer that calculating damage based on hit probabilities is pointless when dealing with low sample scenarios like typical D&D combat encounters that have 1 to 3 rounds and then it's over. Even with, let's say, like 80% chance to hit, you just might roll 2 natural ones in a row and then everything else goes out a window because, you know, that's what makes D&D fun. The randomness is part of the narrative in and of itself. itself. Next, I will assume the character eventually ends up with maxed out charisma score, as that's what personally I would do, while your strength score will remain a 16 and therefore your base attack roll modifier and your damage will be slightly lower. You will still have a potential aura advantage with Shadow Blade and be able to activate a respectable accuracy buff via your Sacred Weapon Channel Divinity if you need it. Now, in the middle of the broad daylight, fighting a high armor class monster with several hundred hit points, you can use your bonus action and a 7th level slot to cast Shadow Blade for max damage. But to counter the fact that you do not get advantage on Shadow Blade's attacks, you use your action to infuse it with a Sacred Weapon Channel Divinity. Then you use Action Surge to immediately start swinging wildly with a plus 14 bonus to hit the target. And let's assume you use your highest 8th level spell slot to precast aid spell sometime before the combat encounter began to increase your and your allies' hit points by 40 points. So you are now left with 1/6, 2/5 and 3/4 level spell slots. That's 6 maximum level Divine Smites you can burn in this fight. Base Shadow Blade deals 5d8 plus 5 psychic damage. Max level Divine Smite on top of it is additional 5d8 radiant damage. Let's say you're able to utilize Sentinel Feet to get a reaction weapon attack off too, because the enemy attacked one of your allies. That's also right in melee reach. That's a total of 30d8 plus 15 damage, exactly 150 on average during the first round. Now, let's assume your party members contributed a bit more damage and it's now round number 2, your turn again. The enemy is still somehow above 0 hit points. You use your action to attack, that's 20d8 plus 10. You use your bonus action for Quickened Booming Blade, that's 13d8 plus 5. At this point, you and your party are like the devil incarnate to this poor monster. It uses the disengage action, starts moving, triggering the 48 movement Booming Blade Thunder damage, only for your Sentinel plus Warcaster Feat combo to kick in as you cast one more Booming Blade for 12d8 plus 5 total. That's 49d8 plus 20 total damage, roughly 240 on average. Most importantly, the enemy's movement speed is now 0 from the Sentinel Feat, so if it's still somehow above 0 hit points after almost 400 damage done by you alone, and probably at least half as much by the rest of your party, you can still tap into your 3rd and 2nd and even 1st level spell slots to keep dealing 200 or more damage per round for a few more rounds. Obviously, this is a very reckless expenditure of valuable resources and you will most likely miss some of these attacks, but this is the sort of damage that you can do, especially against lower AC monsters. In fact, you can do even more damage in the very first round of combat if you don't use your action to, use the Sacred Weapon Channel Divinity. Instead, you just rely on Shadow Blade's aura advantage in dim light or darkness to increase your accuracy, and then you use your standard action and your action surge action to attack with no mercy, like 4 attacks in a round. So yeah, this you can do crazy damage even in the first round of combat. Needless to say, you have higher level sorcerer spells at your disposal as well. You can deploy these based on a situation and circumstances that you're dealing with. Despite the ridiculous damage output, sometimes it is easier to solve a situation without resorting to rolling dozens and dozens of d8s worth of damage at this video's like and subscribe button and the notification bell icon. Seriously, if you still haven't done it, please do it. The YouTube algorithm fiend still has a few hit points left and it's about time you finish it off for good. In terms of roleplay, nothing's really changed other than the fact that this character is now even more lethal, and I initially, made it in 2018 without the Sentinel Feat. Now that it has it, it's dealing even more damage. The opposing forces of Devotion Paladin and Shadow Sorcerer offer interesting duality, which I imagine are constantly in conflict, battling over this character's soul, tormenting it in the process. That's how I mostly played a similar character 2 or 3 years ago. It was pulled apart between its devotion to higher divine ideals and the alluring dark powers manifesting themselves through and from within him. In fact, that can be a story of its own. Heck, this guy can easily be the big bad evil guy of the campaign. I've been told by many DMs watching my videos that they've used my characters like this for their nefarious purposes in their own campaigns. This guy would be very interesting in such a role because it can be easily adapted into a story which follows his, let's say, like tragic destiny or tragic fate, slowly turning him from a reluctant hero, a devotion paladin, to a full-blown maniacal villain, you know, shadow sorcerer with like all these dark influences in his soul. So it can be something worthy of exploration and worthy of role-playing for you to consider, right? As you can see me scrolling through it on the screen, I also updated the old Word file with new information, went a bit more into detail about some things, and did my best to clarify potentially confusing, contradicting, or information that lacks clarity. If you would like to download this file, head on over to my Patreon page and pledge into the Magical Secrets tier. It's not mandatory, it's 100% optional. As you can see, everything I talk about is for free, but if you find the Patreon perks, one of which is downloading this file, worth the trouble, worth the money, consider supporting my efforts there. Special shout out to all of my current patrons: Mike, Matthew, Ewing, BardlyManHardlyTrying, Larry Hocken, Rogor, Kaleron, SuburbanHell, Albert Kwak, Aidan Harth, Gary Kors, Brad Oldham, C Alcazar, Bredwin, Sean, Mannozzi Stefano, Adekoya, guise, bittenbi, Jeremy, Sirois, ShatteredSilence, Devin Jache, Lunatic Dragon, Darth Xín, Ebonhawk, Jeff, Clem, Alex Bell, Harry Howell, Crack Mask, Alexandre Ode, Nathan A.S., Nicholas Joseph, Francisco Martinez, Camilo Vargas, Keelan, Udell 18, Russ Helms, James Orendov, Rich, Wesley Schick, Nidis 12, Edgewalker, Edward Trsinski, Ed Devon Troger, Sean Walker, Tristan Border, Bardman is posting, Undead, Disturbed. Sorry for butchering half of your names. Thank you for your continued support. I'll make sure you get many more videos like this one in the following weeks and months. With everything said and done, MinMax Munchkin out. Talk to you soon.